Hi, I'm not entirely sure about this setup, but we can see as it goes along. So I wanted to talk a little more about Conker and the entryway into what you could call Ooga Booga territory. Because I think that is the next part of the game that we should move into. And the thing then is, why is it the next part of the game? Well, we just finished Windy. I would conclude we finished Windy. We finished the important parts of Windy that I wanted to focus on at an archetypal level, at least. And now, what is there left to do? Well, we cross that threshold of the Great Mighty Pooh, go down into the pipes, and from the pipes we re-emerge out into a world that's called Ooga Booga, and it's a prehistoric sort of world. And it's... what can you say about it? Well, the first thing we encounter really is that Conker really needs to meet these guards, right? Conker meets these guards that he hadn't met before, and he needs to interact with them. And they are asking for, they're asking for some reward to be given to them so that you can pass. Or you need to meet a specific set of criteria, I suppose, if you want to pass. And Conker doesn't meet that criteria because he's a squirrel. He looks like a squirrel, and they want to find a squirrel. They want to find a red squirrel. The thing is that Conker doesn't want to be caught by them. So he enters into this whole trap that he tries to lay for them, where he tries to convince them that he's not a squirrel. The way this happens, sort of just a sec. It's sort of annoying. I'm sorry, this is not a good position because my back is hurting. How can I do this? I could just put this here. Okay, yeah. Sorry. I don't know. Now I need to check the microphone. Okay. Back to usual. I'm not happy with this position. I just don't know what it is. It's like hurting my back to sit like this. This is not... I want to be able to sort of sit really kind of upright and look at the thing directly. But it seems to be difficult to do because it's so sort of inflexible in a way. Okay, let's leave it like that. So Conker finds himself in this position where he needs to cross this barrier, and there's a big barrier he needs to cross, and it's difficult to cross. Okay, but he can get across it. Why? Because he pretends to be someone he's not. He pretends to be something he's not. He pretends to be an elephant. He says, yeah, actually I'm an elephant. And that is what allows him to get through that, what will you call it, disguise, taking on of an appearance, even if it's not wearing anything necessarily, but becoming a different person in some way. That transforming of the self, I think, is then crucial for Ooga Booga in general, because in Ooga Booga we get a whole, I think, exploration on the theme of transformation. But before we move into that, I'm going to say that this theme of transformation, I think, is in general crucial to the game. So in Ooga Booga it gets explored, in my opinion. Yes, I think it gets explored at a deeper level than it had before. But it had been addressed before, directly. It had been addressed. It's just that it hadn't been addressed in a direct way, I think. And so here we begin to see a direct addressing of the theme of disguise. Disguising yourself. But, as I said, I think this appears in other parts of the game, up until now. A few examples, for example, that I could give would be, well, let's say that, what's a good place to start? The Beatles? Not the Beatles. Where can we go? The King. The King is a good place to start, maybe, because the King, I mean the Bee King. The Bee King in the farm, he is pretending to be a beggar on the street, but in fact he's a king. And that in itself is already this theme of a different appearance than your identity might suggest, or a different identity than your appearance might suggest, things of that nature, and transformation of identity. Like, now I'm a beggar, but I used to be a king, or now I'm a king, but I used to be a beggar. And so, of course, and in that case also, it is a transformation mostly achieved through words. The king simply says that he's not a king. He tells Conker, I'm not a king, can you spare a dime? Or he sort of pretends to not be a king with his words. And Conker believes him. But then it turns out Conker realizes, no, this guy actually still must be a king. He has money, even though he's pretending to not have money. Conker figures out that he actually does have money, and therefore he's sort of, he's still a king at some level. He still must have access to those resources. But the king's pretending that he doesn't. And this pretense, I think, is crucial for the game. Another example that comes to mind, these may be a little disorganized and not necessary to be told in this order, but we can get to that in different orders, really. We can get to different parts of the game in different orders, so we might as well go there. This other way of telling the story in terms of disguise is the hay monster itself, because the hay monster is this big hay thing, but in fact, inside, he's a robot. And of course, even just the very last boss, the Panther King, at some level pretends to be a Panther King. He doesn't really know that he's pretending, but he's sort of pretending to be a Panther King. But inside, there's an alien. There's an alien actually living inside. So I feel as if, maybe disguise isn't the best word we could give this, but it's a theme that travels across different areas. In the case of the Panther King, more than disguise, it would be like a sort of a shell. The Panther King is like a shell for something else that's inside. But But in any case, I think this is a theme that appears in the game, this theme of pretense, I suppose. And pretense specifically from the perspective of kind of things that are inside of you that you don't expect to be inside of you, and that at some level are a deep part of your identity, even though they're not entirely visible at first glance. Something along those lines. And as I said, I think Conker, when he enters into Ooga Booga, he experiences this once again. He needs to sort of pretend that he's something that he's not. And in Ooga Booga, himself, he deals with this a few more times. He becomes the leader of the tribe. He wears this hat that gives him a certain status in society, and pretends in some way to be someone who has emerged from a giant dragon. He's kind of conquered the dragon, entered into the dragon, gone right into the rear end of the dragon, and at that point finds this transformation where he can transform into an Ooga Booga tribes person. And when he returns back, everyone really seems to be very impressed with what he's done, or they're impressed for some reason. It's hard to know why they're impressed. Maybe they're just impressed because, I don't know, it's hard to know why they're impressed, but they're impressed with him at some level, and they think that he's like a god or something divine, that he's a divine ruler over them, and therefore they follow him. They follow his every word. They follow him, every action of his they follow. So he's not really their ruler, or when who am I to say, right? I don't really know, but the pretense, I think, is that he's just pretending to be their ruler, that he's just found himself in the situation where they seem to believe that he's his ruler, so he just goes on with it, kind of thing. In the same way that the guards, pretended that they knew that he was a squirrel, and then he's like, no, actually, I'm not a squirrel, I'm an elephant. And they're like, there's a theme of people just accepting Conker's kind of face value, some theme about acceptance, I suppose, of what Conker is, that happens in this level. And Conker just accepts that. He just goes on with it. He's like, okay, sure. You will see me as something else. Let me be something else for you. I'll be something else for you. No problem. I'll be your leader, or I'll not be your leader. I'll sort of be different things for different moments, and that's okay. I think that's what Conker's doing. That's that. I suppose, just to move on, maybe you could even say that Booga the Nut, the final boss, kind of embodies some of these ideas, because he embodies this big leader role, but he's not actually a leader in the way that they expect him to be, or in the way that he is embodying. He's pretending to be a leader who has a big penis. Apparently that's important, right? to be a leader, and for them, or for him, for someone. And this pretense gets discovered. It gets discovered that actually he didn't. He wasn't that kind of leader. He didn't have that big penis. And therefore, he doesn't have that big penis. So the big penis was a disguise, or a lie, a pretense, something that he was doing to pretend that he was someone else, that he was a different type of person than who he was, than who he said he was. I think those are some of the themes that appear in Ooga Booga relating to to identity. An identity specifically as in a kind of an identity that's acquired. Another one, for example, that appears in Nooga Booga, I think, is that Conker becomes the mother of the dinosaur. The dinosaur is hatched in this level, and we have a very similar situation as with the bridge guards, and with the tribesmen who honor him as a god, which is that someone pretends he's his mother. They think he's his mother, and he's like, yeah, sure, I am, right? The dinosaur thinks Conker is his mother. The dinosaur then calls Conker his mother, and just Conker goes along with it, and he's like, yes, I am your mother, follow me, right? There's an issue of authority in a lot of these situations, because Conker's basically just saying, yes, I have the authority here, I'm an authority figure. I'm either a god, or a mother, or a leader, or, you know, I have some sort of authority that you need to follow. Because if I'm your mother, you need to follow what I say. And so on.